Everyone, it's Emily Fox. Today's video is going to be the beginning of a new foundation series. If you haven't seen it, I did one with foundation. So basically I'm testing a bunch of best-selling foundation, this time at Sephora. I'm putting them to the test, doing wear tests for the next 10 days. And then at the end, I'm doing a wrap-up telling you the best ones, the worst one, and then you can go back and actually see them on me throughout the day with close-ups in natural lighting and flattering close-up and everything, just because I want you to really be able to see how they wear. Some of these foundations I will not have tested beforehand, so they will be first impression, but by the time I do the wrap-up in 2 months, I will have more time to put them to the test, and at that point, that's when I'll mention price and color range. But today is a wear test on the first foundation. This has been a best-selling foundation at Sephora since forever. This is the Estee Lauder Double Wear Stay in Place Makeup Foundation. I think at this point we all know that this is like full coverage. You know, like there's like, you know, medium full coverage, and there's like this foundation. So I'm gonna be applying it today, wear it throughout the day, do close up and everything as always. So in order to be consistent, I won't use any primer. I will apply it with a sponge and I'll apply a little bit of loose powder. If you don't know, my skin is combination. It is all over the place. My T-zone gets oily, especially my forehead, but I do have some dehydration, mostly on my nose, although some foundations weirdly will give me dry patches somewhere. So I feel like you can kind of have an idea depending on your skin type, depending where you look, what the foundation would look like on you. So the foundation, my first thoughts. This is not a first impression. I've definitely used this before. My pet peeve with this foundation is always the fact that there's no pump, because you're spending so much money on high-end foundation and there's no pump. I believe the official explanation is that the formula is thick to the point that it will clog the pump. That's kind of why you can buy it separately if you really want it, which if that's the case, I'll allow it. But still, I would prefer having the pump coming with and just removing it if it gets clogged, but you know, just my 2 cents. So the foundation is actually kind of liquidy considering the formula. I kind of expect it every time to be thicker, but you can kind of shear it out a little bit with a sponge, which is what I prefer doing because I don't need, especially at the moment, my skin is doing really good, but I'm going to zoom you in and we're going to see the amount of coverage because I do have some redness. So I think this lighting is pretty good. You can see my natural texture. Once again, I will bring you in front of a window so you will see it even better, but you can see I have some redness, nothing crazy really, but I will show you the coverage. I think the most I have is like a little bit of like leftover. So let's do half my face. Oh, I didn't tell you my shade. I am 1 and 2. And I am usually pretty neutral on the light side. And in store, I did struggle a little bit finding my shade. I tend to like go towards the neutral or cool. But I thought with the lighting at Sephora, this one was going to be quite orangey. But turns out I think it's pretty good actually. Now that I'm talking about this, let me do a swatch so I can show you what it's going to look like once it dries compared to a fresh swatch to help you if you do go in store to choose a shade. So I'm going to start with a thin layer and then I'll build it up a little bit just to show you that it is definitely possible. By the way, a little tip, if you don't want super full coverage everywhere, I always just do this motion with my sponge to apply a thin layer. As you can see, it definitely still gives me enough coverage to cover everything. And if I feel like I need a little bit more, I'll just tap and build it up a little bit. But I just really like the finish when I do that. It just makes it way more natural. Because this foundation, you're gonna see, it tends to emphasize texture, especially it is early in the morning, especially if you have any dehydration, which I do have. This is definitely well known for people that have like oilier skin and acne prone skin. They do have a nude version, which is a bit more sheer and that suits a bit more drier skins. And what I like to do sometimes is to mix them together just to give like that perfect balance between the two. So you can see that it perfectly evened out my skin. You could build it up more. I don't really feel the need because it will become too much for my skin and I don't feel like I need more coverage in this. Like even any pimple that I had are like 90% covered, so at this point I would be perfectly comfortable walking around outside. So you can see before, after. Once again, I'm dragging my sponge a little bit just to thin it out a little bit, and wherever I feel the need, I'll just add a bit more. It kind of prevents it from being too drying and too emphasizing the texture too much that way. I definitely feel like it looks better whenever I thin it out a little bit. By the way, it does have a like foundation smell, but it's not perfumey, which I would rather have a foundation smell like nothing really than a perfume. So personally, my preferred way to apply it is definitely a sponge, because I feel like whenever I use a brush, it becomes too much and it kind of looks like that, you know, that meme. So it's very easy, I feel like, to like overdo it a little bit. However, whenever I feel like I really need coverage, it definitely will be there for me and give it to me. However, I feel like it's a hard balance between giving me enough coverage but don't overly emphasizing the texture. But you know, sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. And if you want to like go out or take pictures and you want to look flawless, you're one shade, like straight up one shade. I'm gonna let this dry a little bit more. I'm gonna go do the rest of my makeup and then I will bring you in front of a window so you can see everything. Okay, so let's ignore that I have like 50 swatches of lipsticks, but you can see that the color actually ends up being a pretty good color for me. My hands are always a little lighter than the rest of my body. I just tend to like put my leftover sunscreen on them. So you can see that it doesn't oxidize a crazy color. It dries slightly darker, slightly peachier, but it means that it's definitely neutral once it's fully dry. You're struggling to see it on my hand, let's be real. It dries fully matte, and yeah, you can see it. Nothing crazy, not orange Oompa Loompa, not 10 shades darker. You don't have to calculate a bunch of stuff like, oh, like how many shades lighter do I have to go? It's a fairly like good match straight away. Okay, so I applied the rest of my makeup on top, and as you can see from this distance, it looks flawless. That's why I feel like whenever you want to wear something to go out, or in my case to film, for example, it looks straight up amazing. However, my issue and the reason why it's not a daily foundation for me, and it's not something I necessarily recommend if you're going to be outside in the sun, because it's very unforgiving, and yeah, the texture of my skin looks straight up horrible with this foundation. Like, look at my nose. Yeah, that's about right. And even the chin, like you can see, I applied such a thin layer, you saw me, and it just emphasizes like literally everything. So that's kind of why I have such a complicated relationship with this foundation. I love the way it looks. Like right now I'm looking at a viewfinder and I'm like, damn, this is looking great. But then again, in person from up close, it's a bit too much. So it really depends on your needs. If you really need the coverage, I say there's a reason this is really popular, especially if you have oilier skin, because it won't, you know, you tend to have less dry patches. But I'm going to keep wearing it throughout the day and I'm going to update you. You're going to see how it looks with a bit more time, a bit more oil, and yeah, I'll see you in a bit. We are at the end of the day. It is now 10 hours later, and I wanted to update you on the foundation. You can probably tell I am a little shiny, but if you've seen some of my other videos, you would notice that this isn't that bad. Quite frankly, I feel like this foundation definitely helps keep the oils at bay, and obviously if you have oily skin, you wouldn't wait 10 hours before reapplying some powder. But I wanted to show you the close-up because I feel like throughout the day, when the oils start peeking more and more through, the texture looks better. The only thing is my nose, the dehydration is still kind of and actually I have a little patch there that I've been wanting to peel so badly for a few hours, but you know, keeping it all in for this video. But overall, I do feel like, once again, when you get a bit oilier, it does look better. So I'm hoping it's going to show. At this distance, at this hour, I feel like it can be hard. Let me just do the... so you can see my skin texture. My nose a bit. It's probably the worst part. But my chin looks better than it did this morning. And my forehead, yeah, it looks very shiny. But actually, I'm going to use this in a second. But the texture is not looking, you know, disgusting. The foundation did not separate, which is like a must if you have oily skin. So let me just use my very fancy toilet paper to remove the oil because we want to see the transfer. Because if you haven't seen it recently, I did a video where I was testing the Anastasia Beverly Hills, the newest foundation, the luminous one, and it was gross. At night I did this and like the whole foundation came off. It was... anyway. So you can see there's a little bit of transfer, but considering how full coverage that thing is, I don't think it's major. And I would be good to go at this point. I feel like, let me just do a bit between my brows. No. So, see, just doing that, I feel like made it all good again. So personally, I do like this foundation. I don't use it every single day because I don't really need the coverage, / it would become a bit much for my dehydration. However, if for a day I have a photo shoot or I have an event and I would need to look flawless, maybe I have breakouts going on and I just want to like not have to worry about it, I feel like this foundation is great for it, especially if my skin is on the oilier side at that moment. And that's kind of why everyone that knows this foundation uses it. It's great for those reasons. However, I personally don't think it's really the best one if you have more dry skin. And again, I have mentioned that they have the nude version, and I do like that one much better for that. And if you kind of like an in-between, mixing them does definitely work. So that's gonna be it for this wear test. I really hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe because you definitely don't want to miss out on the wrap up. It is late. I am tired. I hope you enjoyed this one. Thumbs up if you did. And I will be putting on the screen some of the videos that I've done that I recommend you check out. Then I will link the playlist for this series down below. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye. I could wear this foundation for another 12 hours easily.